Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to our second edition of Dudes Talkin' Metal. And for this episode, we have a special guest dude joining us here, a very respected dude out there in the metal community. He's no stranger to the lair. I'm sure he's no stranger to everybody out there. He's got his own YouTube channel, The Contrarians. He's got a podcast, History in 5 Songs. Me and Martin do a podcast together, AC/DC podcast, Kicked in the Teeth. He's written books. He's written thousands of reviews. So joining us today for Dudes Talking Metal is Martin Popoff. Martin, thank you for joining us today.
Yes. How you doing, John? I was waiting there thinking, who is the special guest they're talking about? Is it Butch? Is it Tony? And all of a sudden, oh no, he is talking about me. So funny.
And then we've got our regular dudes back here from our last episode. We've got Tony from South Carolina, right, Tony?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, and Butch from Pittsburgh, right? Yep.
That's
And
right.
I'm representing Tampa, and Martin's holding down Canada for us with Toronto. So okay,
He's holding down a whole country on his own.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's got the weight of Canada on his shoulders.
Yeah. I've got my Father's Day raccoon in a dumpster mug.
Nice.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Does that mean something? A raccoon in a dumpster? Is that?
Yeah, we have a lot of raccoons in Toronto, and they bust into there's all this technology to keep them out of the dumpsters, but they're all over the place. So
you make coffee mugs out of it just to to make light of it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So today's episode, we are going to be giving you what, in our opinion, are the 10 heaviest albums from American bands from the 70s. So the 10 heaviest albums from American bands that came out in the 70s. This was a little tricky to do, when people think of early heavy metal, they tend to go over into Europe, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, stuff like that. But we wanted to focus on America. So we've got our 10 heaviest. We're going to start from our lightest, go to our heaviest. Tony has to cut out early. He's a dude in demand. He's got a date when they're recording session with Rock Fantasy Files.
Double booked.
Steven, he's a guy that we got to get here on the channel. So we're going to let Tony go first. So Tony, give us the thought process behind your list and then run down your list for us.
So just trying to put this together, we had discussed, we had a little thread going back and forth and all. This is pretty tough because there isn't a lot of it's not a lot of strong candidates like we do when we have the European bands, for sure. But there is some great stuff out there, and there's a lot of stuff that I probably have not even discovered. I mean, there's a lot of underground stuff out there as well. But I'm going to go, we're going to kind of go, I guess we're going from least heavy to heaviest. I'm going to go number one. I'm going to go Montrose from 1973. Of course, Ronnie Montrose, Sammy Hagar. This was kind of a precursor to all that LA, the glam LA Van Halen scene, and there's your connection with Sammy Hagar and Van Halen, of course, because these guys were really popular in Europe too. I mean, Steve Harris is a major fan of Montrose, but there's some really like heavy rock tune, a lot of cool guitar work on this one. With you got Rock the Nations, Bad Motor Scooter, where you got that motorcycle intro sound on that would be stolen by Motley Crue years later for one of their songs. Space Station Number 5, another one that starts off with this crazy like slide guitar intro piece. Make It Last, another great riff on there. And then of course you've got Rock Candy, which is just a great riff, and it's just a heavy riff. And it definitely would be the blueprint of what became like the LA sound from these guys. Number two, I had a tie with 2 Alice Cooper albums. I think I'm just going to go with one. I was kind of stuck between Killer and Love It to Death. Both of these are from 1971. This one, Killer, I think I'm going to go with it. It's just, I find it darker. It's not as much as heavy as it's just dark. You've got Halo of Flies, which is a really like a just psychedelic, just crazy piece of music that they put together. You Drive Me Nervous is kind of punk rock sounding, as is Yeah, 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 but that's not really that heavy. It's kind of poppy. But then you got Dead Babies. I mean, That's pretty dark and pretty heavy subject matter, but it's a lot of heavy guitar work, even on the poppy songs on this one. So like I said, I'm going to go with Killer from Alice Cooper for that one. Let's see, number 3, I'm going to go with Captain Beyond from 1972. Now, this was a band that was formed by Rod Evans, from the original singer for Deep Purple. You've got guitar player is Larry Reinhardt. They called him Rhino. He was the guitarist in Iron Butterfly. And then you've got Bobby Caldwell, which is the drummer from Johnny Winter's band. It's a pretty heavy record, though. This is my copy with the socket. It's got the what do you call it? The cover like changes or whatever, they lenticular or whatever. Autograph from Bobby signed it. I saw him a few years ago. He's like the sole member carrying the band. But there's some great stuff on here. Dancing Madly Backwards, first song. Mesmeration, Eclipse, just such a powerful riff on that one. Raging River of Fear, another just epic sounding song, and really cool record from Captain Beyond. And that one is what is that? What year is that? 1972. Let's see, number 4. We're gonna go with Van Halen 2. I got to pick something from Van Halen. 1979. The first album, definitely a game changer. A lot of great riffs on there, a lot of heaviness on it, but I just feel like this album's a darker album for them. And like I said, it's right at the cusp. It's right at the end, 1979. But I mean, you've got some poppy tunes on this one, but then you got Bottoms Up, and I mean, Light Up the Sky, one of my favorite Van Halen songs. That's just super heavy. You've got Out of Love Again, another just super heavy one. So I mean, it's and just a lot of great riffs on this record. I mean, Eddie Van Halen, I think this is where they pretty much came up with that brown sound by the time they got to this one, wouldn't you say? Probably, or either Fair Warning. But he had a unique guitar tone for sure. From there, I'm gonna go number 5. I'm gonna go Aerosmith Rocks, which is my favorite Aerosmith album. And I wanted to throw Aerosmith in, and I just feel like this one's got some of the heaviest riffs on it. Just a lot of really good songs on this one. Back in the Saddle, it's swanky, but it's a heavy riff. Rats in the Cellars is hard driving, kind of punky. In combination, I mean, that's just a great riff on that one as well. One of their darkest songs and heaviest songs, Nobody's Fault, is on this one. Testament thrash band would have gone to cover that one. Licking a Promise is a fast-paced one, but it's got heaviness about it. And even the ballad, I mean, Home Tonight, the ballad's got all these just heavy power chords all in it. So I definitely had to throw this one in, Aerosmith Rocks. And that one's from 1976. From there, I'm going to go Sweet with Desolation Boulevard. Now, this is the U.S. version of it that came out in 1975. There's 2 versions of this album. This is the U.S. version I'm going with. Ballroom Blitz, it's a poppy song, but it's got this quite heavy delivery about that song. I mean, people know that song. No You Don't, that's a super heavy riff in that one, and just the whole way the whole song is delivered is heavy. Sweet F.A., another just driving hard riff. It's got the questionable lyrics. If she doesn't spread, I'm gonna bust her head. I mean, that's heavy, and just the lyrics alone. Imagine hearing that as a kid, hearing that, you know.
Didn't age well.
No, but you wouldn't know what it is either, really, you know, probably when you were a kid. But Set Me Free, kind of proto speed metal song. The thrash band Heathen would even record that years later. Into the Night, another one. That one and Solid Gold Brass, just great, just heavy riff songs. So Sweet Desolation Boulevard is my next one there. Let's see where we're at here. Gonna go for number 7. Gonna go 1975, the first Ted Nugent record. Stranglehold, one of the most bombastic heavy riffs ever. Stormtrooping, another one, just killer riff there, really heavy. Snakeskin Cowboys, massive opening riff on that one. Motor City Madhouse, just a kind of fast, chaotic kind of song. And even Queen of the Forest has a bit of heaviness about it as well. So I definitely got to throw that in from 75, and that's Ted Nugent. let's see where we're at now. We switched this around. I had a bunch of stuff in order, and he said, "Hey, you got to do it in the heaviest ones first." So,
You're doing a good job.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Kiss Hotter Than Hell, 1974. Had to pick a Kiss album. My favorite one, as we've talked about before, is Rock and Roll Over, and that's got a lot of heavy riffs on it as well. But this one is just a very dark record. I think it's darker than the first one. They sound almost on par with each other, the first and second album, but this one's a little more muddier. It's a little darker sounding. I mean, you got it starts off with Got to Choose, which is just kind of a heavy riff on that one. But then you got Parasite, and Parasites, it's more kind of almost proto thrash in a way. The title track's got a hard edge riff in that one, Hotter Than Hell. One of the heaviest songs on here is Watching You. I mean, that's super heavy for that time period. And Strange Ways from one of Ace Frehley's best songs and riffs that he came up with. So I'm going to go with Hotter Than Hell from Kiss.
Nice.
From there, we're going to go. This one is from 1970, so it just falls into the 70s category here. This is kind of heavy psych blues with Sir Lord Baltimore. And this record is really freaking heavy. I mean, it's the closest thing I come here to like Blue Cheer. I mean, it's so much, it's a lot heavier than what was coming out at that time as far as Cream and Jimi Hendrix and even Blue Cheer. The part of it was recorded at Electric Ladyland Studios, so that could have heavied up the sound a little bit. But Master Heartache, just what a great song. I mean, just it's super, super heavy. Hard Rain Coming, another one's fast paced, kind of really heavy. The title track itself just rips. It's called Kingdom Come. Just a killer track there.
That's one of the best, man. That song is so heavy.
Yeah, and Helium Head, another massive heavy track. And even the album cover just screams heavy. I mean, you look at that and imagine being a young guy going in the record store and flipping through and going, I don't know what this is, but this has got to be heavier than Cream. I mean, it just looks heavy, And my number one is going to be Rock City by Riot. And this one, this came out in 1977, and it's pretty freaking heavy to be 1977. It is full-on heavy metal. I mean, it's got really great tracks. Desperation kicks the album off. Full metal type song from 1977. To hear a song like this is just full-on what would be the blueprint of just standard heavy metal in general. I'm sure the new wave of British metal bands were listening to the first couple of Riot records and we're going like, wow, this is something we can extend on here. Warrior, I'll debate all day, it's the first power metal song ever. Some say Kill the King from Rainbow, which was the first one, and it does fall in that category. But the structure and blueprint of what power metal would be and become is the song Warrior. Just the whole structure, the guitar solo, everything. Just a great track. Rock City, Overdrive. I mean, just both songs, just cool heavy metal riffs. Angel's got a super heavy riff to it. Heart of Fire. It's got kind of chunky and thrashy, but yeah, this album's is great. If you've never heard it, this is my original pressing on the Fire Sign label too. So it's now anybody that came in the store and looked at that album cover, they would go, "What the hell is that?"
One of the most legendary mascots.
Is it heavy? Is it? What is it? I mean, I think I would have been curious enough to pick it up and go, all right, I got to check this out because this is either going to be stupid or really heavy, But yeah, so that's the legendary mascot for Riot for sure. So yeah, that's where I stand at, guys, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Yeah,
Nice
great
job.
list. I knew that there was going to be somebody. I knew that you guys were going to mention some bands, and I was, oh man, I forgot about them. And Sweet was that band for me. I completely spaced that they were. I always think of them. I don't know why. I don't.
And there's so many heavy
based on
riffs
them.
on that because you think about them having poppy songs and stuff. You think about Action. It's not that heavy of a song. Or
You know
Fox-
what? Tony caused me to knock out one of mine and put in Sweet. But now that we're talking about it here, they're actually from the UK.
They're British.
American
Oh
band. Yeah,
wow, I didn't
pretty
even
cool
think
stuff.
about that,
Yeah.
man.
I'm thinking, I
Wow.
forgot. Yeah, it's
That's what I
Well,
was just saying. I didn't realize they were American. I was
yeah,
thinking,
I gotta
wow,
go back.
wow,
I'm
man, I
looking
didn't
them up
I
on the
didn't even think
computer
about
here.
that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, like,
They were so big in the U.S. I didn't even think
yeah,
about that. Wow.
yeah.
Boo,
they could have been
boo-wee.
because you know what? They're very influential on the LA glam stuff. Like I argue
Yeah,
this
very
that when
much.
people say that all the LA bands were glam, for me, glam is a very specific thing. It's T-Rex, it's Sweet, it's Mark Bolan. Yeah, Hanoi Rocks is glam. Faster Pussycat is glam. I don't consider Rat and their look may be glam. So Sweet was very influential on all those LA bands. So it's easy to kind of think that they could have been a California, band. So
It's so funny.
Okay.
I'm going like, oh, I gotta take out this legs diamond. I gotta put it Sweet.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
looking up.
since
I gotta get
Sweet's
the
not
tracks here. It's like, oh, it's just hitting
Sweet's
me, you know?
disqualified, and we're going to
Yeah.
go ahead and do the second Alice Cooper
Okay.
record. I couldn't take Love It to
Yeah.
Death because this one
Detroit
definitely.
in the house.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you never heard this one, another great one. Hallowed Be Thy Name, just great song. I mean, not confused with the Iron Maiden track at all. Super track. Black Juju, another super heavy one. And Second Coming, one of my favorite Alice Cooper songs ever. And that's another really dark, heavy track. And then you got Ballad of Dwight Fry. I mean, that's pretty dark and heavy as well. Just a man losing his mind pretty much. So we'll disqualify Sweet and put in Alice Cooper. How about that one? So Alice Cooper got 2 votes.
All right, right on. Okay, I
Gonna
forgot to
take off,
mention.
guys. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
having me.
thanks, Tony. Thanks.
Thanks, Tone. See you, man.
All right.
Good to
we'll
see you
ya.
guys.
That was great.
Great list.
I forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode that Darren from Sabbath Sunday sent me a list of 10 too that I'm going to read quickly at the end. So let's move on now to Martin. Martin, what's your 10?
Okay, so I absolutely spent my youth like literally. We based all our love of these albums on how much heavy metal was on them, almost like mathematically. We almost had a slide rule out or throwing it on scales to figure this out. So this is a true reverse order. I did this book, Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal, the 70s one. It's got, I think, 4 lists in the back. The top 100 greatest albums of the 70s, the heaviest obscurities. And I actually went through and I'm more or less sticking almost exactly to what I had in there. Although I didn't have this exact list, I didn't break it out by America, but I picked out the American ones. So now that Sweet is back off my list, I'll put in my original number 10, which is the Second Legs Diamond album. A Diamond is a Hard Rock. These guys are considered the America's Deep Purple. Honorable mention, as I noticed in my list, literally, I think even before you get to 20 or 30, I had in there the First Legs Diamond album. So they put out 2 albums in 77, and I had the Third Legs Diamond album, which came out in 79 or 78. There's a little dispute about that. But this is the heaviest. It's got the most songs on it. Diamond is a Hard Rock is a good heavy one on here. Jailbait, I think, is heavy. Evil's heavy on here. The production and the performances is a little polite. It's very clean, produced by Eddie Leonetti. So it's got a little bit of that thing I complain about with Armored Saint, actually. So that's my number 10. My number 9 is Aerosmith Rocks. Pretty darn heavy album. You got Combination, you got Rats in the Cellar, you got Nobody's Fault. I think Lickin' a Promise is super heavy. The guitar tone is crazy heavy on this. And as Tony mentioned, even Home Tonight, the one ballad, has got big power chords. It's got extremity of vocals as well. So it's got heavy metal vocals all over it from Steven Tyler. And then the next mellowest song is Last Child, and Sick as a Dog I like. It's rocking enough. What's the other one? I've got it right in front of me. Why don't I look at it? Get the Let Out. So yeah, basically all heavy, and Back in the Saddle is pretty heavy too. So yeah, heavy Aerosmith album. And again, down the list, even before you get to 30, there would be Draw the Line. There'd probably be Get Your Wings as well. Number 8, I'm going with Ted Nugent's State of Shock. Again, it was close between this and the debut, as Tony mentioned. The credit to Ted all the way back to 75. He's making a pretty heavy album, but I've always had a soft spot for this one. I think it's pretty heavy throughout, and it's got Paralyzed on it and Snake Charmer, which are absolutely heavy. So that is my number 8. My number 7, Yesterday and Today Struck Down. Basically the the White Hot Van Halen album before Van Halen. This thing is the chemistry on here and the drumming from Leonard Hayes and the big cavernous, heavy, hot, humid sound on here. And it's basically a pretty heavy album too. So this is from 77. The debut is 76. The debut is pretty heavy. It would show up before, 30 or so as well. And then they wouldn't have another album until 81. So they're out of this. Next, I have number 6, Van Halen 2. Again, as Tony says, dark. They discover the brown sound on here. It's pretty heavy throughout. DOA, Light Up the Sky, of course. Even the You're No Good is fairly heavy cover. And even the poppy ballad songs are still, just crazy, heavy, raging guitar, bass, and drums, even though they're poppy. So that's my number 6. My number 5, a bit of a diversion here. We're going with Dead Boys, Young, Loud, and Snotty. Basically, this is the heaviest punk album out of America. And a close second, although, down the list definitely would be the second and last Dead Boys album, We Have Come For Your Children, which mine oddly says Down to Kill on the record label. But this is 1977, molten guitar sound, fast, heavy, raucous vocals. Basically, almost like a Saturday Night Live parody of a punk band, the Dead Boys are. There's from the name of the band to the name of the album to the shot of the band on the cover and the sound and Stiv's vocals and Stiv's Iggy Pop isms. This is a very heavy punk album, 1977, ground zero year for punk. And next, ground here, we've got Ram Jam with Portrait of the Artist as a Young Ram. So they only made 2 albums. This is the second, 1978. This is one of the only albums from America that's got songs like Judas Priest and Scorpion songs on it, with the likes of Pretty Poison, Hurricane Ride, Runway Runaway, Just Like Me. And then the rest of it is like Aerosmith. So this is basically heavy start to finish. There's only like a semi ballad on it that actually even has heavy parts. And credit Jimmy Santoro, who comes into the band and basically turns them into. It's a long story about this album. Basically Kasanitz Cats had 2 separate bands going at the same time, figuring out, are we going to make an album like a BTO Foghat album, like our first album with Black Betty on it, or are we going to make more of an Aerosmith album? And that's what they made. This is like a heavy Aerosmith album, but even heavier than Aerosmith. So, and there's a promo photo, and there's good old Jimmy Santoro second, right in the middle there. And he basically didn't do anything before this album, didn't do anything after this album. And school teachers, Facebook friend, pops up once in a while. I interviewed him when I did the story of these albums. So that's what the first one looks like. This wouldn't even make my top probably 50. And they only made the 2 albums. That just shows you how different that band was.
Hey,
next,
Martin.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. While we're on the topic of them, and you mentioned, I remember probably reading it in one of the book, the little book you did on
the
Ram
Metal
Jam record
series. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did they have was Bill Bartlett in the studio working on the other style record? Is there a record that was shelved that never saw the light of day, or that was
that I don't quite remember how finished it was. Nobody's ever heard those sessions. I mean, Bill is still in the band on this album, but that's exactly the story. You're right, Butch. I mean, literally, Kasanitz Cats was almost like having these guys were like mice in a lab, coming up with which album are we going to release, right? And then they put this one out, and then Mike Scavone quickly goes to jail in some sort of big crazy drug bust thing, and they don't tour the album, and that's it. So it becomes this legendary heavy metal album. It absolutely blew us away. I was not expecting it to be like this after the first one. We get this album because the first one is like, it's like I say, BTO Foghat, Buffalo Burger Rock, right? Yeah. It's like, so this one maybe just as good, like whatever, right? But no, it quickly turned out to be one of our favorite albums. Gone Wild on here is just such a joyous rockin' bush party drinking song. It's not
Smoking.
even the heaviest thing on it. It's kind of got a little bit of boogie southern rock to it, but it is just recorded and performed so crazy screeching heavy that it's just hilarious. Like there's guitar soloing all throughout it while competing with Mike singing and stuff. It's
Yeah.
so funny. It's got the most chemistry. But yeah, what a great album, and I've got it really quite high up the list. I've often called that the heaviest album from America from the 70s before. So I've had it all the way up to number one in my mind at times. Okay, next. I don't know what number I'm up to, but we're up to, well, hang on. I got, yeah, 3 left. So this is third, Montrose, and credit to Montrose for being this heavy in 1973. I've often called this America's first heavy metal album. I think it's the first one that really takes you to that place. And as Tony said, you got Rock the Nation, Space Station Number 5. Space Station Number 5 is maybe the first power metal song. It's a killer rockin' track. Totally molten guitar tones, heavy throughout. I remember as a kid, the only song we thought was substandard was the cover, Good Rockin' Tonight, and even that's super heavy. So that's great. Number 2, I have Riot Narita. I think this is much heavier than Rock City, much more modern. It's faster, it's better recorded. It's got 10 songs on it. Our band in the 80s, we covered Road Racing from this. We covered Outlaw from the next one. But yeah, Road Racing from this. But yeah, so many heavy songs on here. Narita, the power metal instrumental on here, named for the Tokyo airport. There's 10 songs on here. They're Born to Be Wild is super heavy. This is really almost a contender for number one. I mean, I don't know. This is pretty close at this end, but I think it's way heavier than Rock City. Rock City would have made my top 30 or so.
What year did Narita come out? 79?
79.
79.
Okay.
So we go 77, 79, 81, I believe, for the next one, Fire Down Under. And my number one is Van Halen. The album's so good they had to name it twice. You know, I think I remember getting this as a kid, and basically we thought this was almost the only band who had some songs as heavy and as cool as Scorpions and Judas Priest. So that would be like I'm the One, Atomic Punk, Ain't Talking About Love, and what is it? On Fire. And then the guitar tone is incredible. It's you know, they have no ballads, but there's a lot of kind of stinky songs on here, like Feel Your Love Tonight and Ice Cream Man. Well, it's a cover, but more like Feel Your Love Tonight and Little Dreamer we did not like as kids. We thought that sounded like our barroom Canadian bands like Moxie and Tease and stuff, right? Triumph. But you know, hey, but you really got me super heavy on here. We were not massive fans. We didn't think Jamie's Crying or Running with the Devil were particularly heavy, but the 4 heavy songs on here make this so heavy. And the fact that it's all very super powerfully recorded guitar throughout, it's all guitar, bass, and drums, no ballads, brings it up there. But yeah, pretty darn close between these 3, right? Van Halen, Riot, and Montrose for me. So that is my list.
Nice. I remember in your collector's guide 70s book, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but it was something like about that first Van Halen record. When you're living this fast, who's got time for G's? Because there's so many like missing Running with the Devil, Ain't Talking About Love. I forget how you phrased it, but
Right.
I thought that was great. And your collector's guide to some of those bands you picked on there, I discovered them through your collector's guide. Ram Jam being one of them, because I remember how much you praised Ram Jam, and Legs Diamond was another one that I didn't know anything about those bands before I got that book. So thank you for that. And thank you for your list.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Butch.
just quickly, I had as honorable mentions, the first Rex, the second Rex, Angel Hell of a Band could have been on there as well. I remember looking at my book, Blood Rock's first album is up there pretty high. You know, that's kind of it. And then there'd be more Aerosmith and more Ted albums and some Kiss albums eventually. Yeah, I wouldn't have put Hotter Than Hell. I wouldn't put any Kiss albums in my top 10, but a couple would start showing up in the next 10.
Cool. All right, Butch, what do you got for your 10?
All right. Well, my thought process going in, first of all, when the topic first came up, I honestly, until the other night, until we talked the other night, John, I never thought about the fact that how few, like, really, like, super heavy records there were from the United States. Like, all the heaviest
Yep.
stuff
Was
came
coming from
from,
Europe.
Europe. So it was really, I'm 53 years old, and it's the first time I really thought about it in that context. So it was really odd to me that there's so much good stuff I love from the 70s that's heavy, but not as heavy as, like, some of these other,
Yeah,
Priest and Sabbath. I mean, those are
right.
a Rainbow. Like, these are some of the benchmarks. So when I made this list, I tried to avoid. There are some I knew were going to come up. Like, I knew Martin was going to pick Ram Jam, so I left it off my list. So this is like a list of, like, albums that would probably be in my top 20 for heaviest. I've been taking them out as we go. I had extras pulled. There might be a couple duplications, but I'll start with the first Blood Rock album, 1970. Really, kind of like where Black Sabbath and Deep Purple meet, with a little bit of a Southern thing going on, them being from Texas. Overall, it's not heavy all the way through, but the songs that are heavy are really heavy. Like, Wicked Truth is crazy heavy. Melvin Laid an Egg, and Double Cross, like, have, like, super heavy riffs on them. And then you have Fantastic Piece of Architecture, which isn't sonically all that heavy, but it's a weighty, kind of, like, dark kind of song. So this is number 10. Still pretty heavy. Then next, there's this band. This is this band Legend from the
Oh yeah.
Fjords from 1979. I had a lot of bands that I could have included that I thought, like, you know, didn't quite, they're bands that, like, maybe a handful of us know about, that follow, like, really follow underground kind of stuff. Legend is a band that a lot of people, like, into, like, epic metal, like, kind of like Manila Road fans, and bands like Slough-Egg, and Dig,
Yeah.
and some doom metal bands are into these guys. Really strong record, pretty heavy, for 79. Some more metallic kind of riffing. The drawback to this record, the vocals are pretty bad. I think he's got a pretty flat voice. But they did this one album and then disappeared. It finally got reissued properly within the last few years, and I guess the band is kind of back together again. But I think now they have there's a one of the members died from the band, one of the founders, and that's why they partly why they hung it up and didn't do anything for years. But I guess now they're coming at it from a Christian perspective. I think they redid this record with, like, Christian themes on it. But this is a really good record. A lot of cool riffing on here and song structures. Definitely worth checking out.
Where are they from? Do you
Um,
know? I didn't
I
realize they
don't
were
know.
American. I just assumed that they were
Yeah,
European.
I'm not sure where they're from. I have to look it up. I got to read the liner notes a little more closely. It's one of those ones I always listen to, but I
Yeah,
never. As I get older, my liner note reading has declined, sadly.
if you had told me they were from like Iceland or something like that, I would have believed you. I just thought that maybe they were from Romania or like somewhere that you
I
typically
want to
wouldn't
say
get
somewhere in,
an
like,
album like that from. So I'm
I want to say
surprised that they're
middle America somewhere, but I'm
really
not. Don't quote me on that.
okay.
Someone will tell us in the comments, I'm sure. Um, Next one I had to include. I was going to include. I didn't know whether to go with Van Halen 1 or 2. I think sonically and riff wise, this one overall is a little bit heavier. Although Light Up the Sky is maybe the heaviest thing Van Halen ever did. That and DOA are crushing. Um, but in terms of influence, and this record pretty much cracked everything open for what they set the stage for the whole LA rock scene, the whole LA metal scene. And it's funny, again, they're another band that I always associated more with the 80s. But 1978, totally influential record, and I think pretty heavy. Um, this one, oh, they put it in Roman numerals, of course. This is 1976. There's this band, this one record, this band called Marcus. Um, Marcus Malone is still active, but he makes strictly blues records now. Um, but one of the first, like, band, integrated kind of metal bands. Um, totally, some of the songs on here are so heavy. Like Black Magic on this record is like Sabbath levels of heavy. There's some progressive kind of stuff on here. Like there's a song called Rise Unto Falcon. That's great. A lot of great double guitar work on this record. There's a couple more like boogie kind of things, but overall, it's a really heavy. Like Pillow Stars is like super heavy. Rise of the Falcon is heavy. Dream Wheel is heavy. Again, Black Magic is crushingly heavy. Great album. And I think Rock Candy reissued that album actually, so it's not as hard to find as you would think. I found it at like an unclaimed salvaging freight outside in a flea market for 50 cents
Nice.
when I was a kid, and I only knew about it because of that for Connoisseurs Only comp that Kerrang had something to do with, that came the Music for Nations put out, where I learned about a lot of bands for the first time. I'm going with Captain Beyond's first. I couldn't leave it off the list, even though Tony brought it up. But I mean, it doesn't get much heavier in terms of like early U.S. proto metal. It's a crazy riffing on here, and really kind of like out there at times, but early, like probably one of the earlier like kind of like stoner metal kind of records too. Killer Rod Evans is killer on here. Like it's really a shame that after this and the next one, which isn't near as good but is still worthy, I think, that he didn't do much more, because his voice is, he's probably one of the most southern sounding Englishmen I've ever heard in my life. Unbelievable record. Let's see. I did put Kiss on here, and I kind of cheated. I initially had Hotter Than Hell, but I was debating between that and this one. I put a live one, which is cheating, kind of, but I mean, as a whole, I mean, of the first 6 records, it doesn't get any or the first 8, including the 2 live records, all the heaviest riffs are minus a song or two, like, but all the versions on here are so much heavier than the studio ones. And they compiled most of the heavy ones are on here. Like She is crushing, and Watching You is heavy. Parasite, like Black Diamond, 100,000 Years, like song after song, just like heavy as hell on this record. And it influential. I mean, it was a huge record. Still their biggest to this day. And if you're going to have one essential one of all their catalog, it's probably the one to get. I mean, my favorite's Destroyer, but if you're can only have one, you can't go wrong with this record. The version of Hotter Than Hell's great on here. Deuce is so much heavier on here. I just in terms of like, I just think it's a heavy record and a great album. And then I went with Rex. This was initially an alternate, but I do think this is a pretty heavy record. Trouble's certainly really heavy. 10 Seconds of Love, sleazy and heavy. It's got a couple things on here that wouldn't be as heavy, but then you got Dead End Kids, which is heavy, and Rock and Roll Dream and Violent Playground, again, on the heavier end of things.
Check this out.
Yeah. That's awesome. I would have killed to have seen these guys live too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was my first big concert, and if you look what Rex is wearing, he's wearing a shirt that says Bebop Deluxe, Cheap Trick, and Rex. And so my first concert was in 1976, Ted Nugent, Bebop Deluxe, and Rex.
Damn, I'm so jealous that you got to see them, because there's no visual document. There's a 3-song King Biscuit concert out there, like audio, but no video anywhere. Him doing flips and all that kind of stuff. So look at that guy. It's a crazy album cover for something so heavy. I mean, pushing the pretty boy thing, but it's such a good record. I mean, this and the next one again, like, are just killer. You would never know if you came across this in a store, like what lays within this record. It's killer. And speaking of Rex Smith, let's go to Michael Lee Smith for the first Stars record. I think this is their heaviest one. Debatable for me if it's this one or Violation is the better one. I usually go with this one because it was my first one. But some really heavy songs on here. Boys in Action is super heavy. Nightcrawler's heavy. Pull the Plug is really dark. I mean, really kind of like twisted for the time. Some of the lyrics on here are kind of twisted. Now I Can is super heavy. A good sense of melody on this record, but a heavy, like almost like, this is kind of like heavy Kiss and Aerosmith kind of record, like killer. Great musicianship, killer vocals. Definitely worth checking out from 1976. And then also from 76, probably one of my favorite bands of all time, top three for sure, is Angels Hell of a Band. I debated between this and the first one, but the first one skews a little bit more progressive, whereas this one definitely crunches a lot more, like Feeling Right, super heavy. The Fortune like starts out, it's kind of like your Tower kind of song. It's like an epic. It starts out kind of mellow, but then it like totally sledgehammers you from the middle on. Anyway you want, it's just a basic rock and roller, like, but Dr. Ice is like funky heavy. Mirrors, totally like precursor to like metal to come, I think. That, and then Pressure Point, I think, is like almost early speed metal. Really fast, totally heavy. Chicken Soup is cool, but like overall, their heaviest record. I mean, it's amazing just in a few short years that they went from being this heavy to what they did on Sinful, which I love that record, but like this is so much heavier, and the band is so. If you just put them on back to back, you'd never think it was the same band based on. I mean, this is like a on borderline metal record at times. Super heavy, great playing all around. Great use of keyboards. Like one of the few heavy kind of bands that I think like really, along with Rainbow, that really managed to get it right, like in terms of incorporating keyboards in a heavy way. And then my number one heaviest one is, I don't know what year this was. 72. Bang's first record. I mean, this is basically the US. This album, anyway, is basically like the US Black Sabbath. I mean, the first two songs on here alone, Lions, Christians, and the Queen, are like straight out of the Sabbath songbook. Same kind of like heavy riffs, vocal thing going on. Just a crushing record. They'd never make one as heavy again. But as far as like, and the album before this, Death of a Country, is not near as heavy. I guess that one got shelved, and then it finally got released a few years ago. But this album is like, I remember reading about this in the International Guide to Hard Rock and Heavy Metal or something, and then I happened to find it. This is a reissue of it. My original is long gone, but when I first heard this record, I was like floored. That I think the writing's great on here. And again, I just think it crushes. Man, the Lions, Christians, the Queen is great. Future Shock is great. Questions is cool. Red Man is great. Definitely, if you're into like old, like definitely like the Sabbathy proto metal stuff from the 70s, this is one of the top five like early like proto metal kind of records like that aren't Sabbath as far as I'm concerned. So that's my number one.
Sweet.
Nice. See, I knew you would do Angel, and I knew that Martin would do Ram Jam, so I left those two off my list. But I do have a bunch of repeats on my list. It's a shame that Bang never released more records. I'll just say that, at least more
I know.
records like that.
I did have I had Riot's Rock City on my list. I had Aerosmith Rocks, so I had Montrose, but I knew that was going to come up. And there were some other things I had. There was a band called Impeccable that Rockadrome put out their record on the rocks, but these are bands like that. No one ever really heard of these bands. So I mean, in terms of like you can turn people on to stuff, but and I know some of the impact of some of these bands is low, but I mean, you're talking about bands that like it's on a local level that their records were coming out. So
there was a band called Illusion. I think the Fort Knox album is 78, right? Fort Knox, Fortnox as one word.
I thought that was early. The Lucifer's Eyes band.
I don't know. Yeah, but I thought Fort Knox is 78. Maybe it's later than that. I keep getting mixed up with Vendetta, which is 82, I think.
Yeah, I think Fort
Yeah.
Knox is early 80s. I
Maybe
had
it's
that
80.
record.
Maybe it's 80. 80 rings a bell. Yeah.
It's in that
Um,
borderline area.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's not too many others though that are like that. And if you include Canada, you could get in the first Moxie, Moxie riding
Yeah.
high, Tease is first, Tease is second on the loose. You could start sneaking in Triumph's first one. You could start
Yeah.
sneaking in 2112, right?
Yeah.
I also debated which leg's Diamond record, but the one I ended up on was Diamond is a Hard Rock, and I thought for sure you would go with the first one for some reason, so I had Diamond pulled just to do something. But yeah, I mean, I think the first one's like heavier overall, but the second one, just the songs that are heavier than anything on it. Like Evil is heavier than
Right.
anything on either record. So
Yeah. Yeah.
All
yeah,
right. Well, for my list, when I was putting this together, I give extra points to, for me, mood and sort of atmosphere and uh, vibe of the whole thing. It isn't. I weigh that more heavily than I do heavy distorted guitar. So that's where on my list I sort of tried to put some of these things together. And like we've all mentioned already, there's really nothing from the American scene. There is no Gates of Babylon. There is no Dissonant Aggressor or Beyond the Realms of
mm-mm.
Death. There is no Under the Sun or Symptom of the Universe. I mean, there's nothing even remotely in the ballpark of those. But okay, so for me, number 10, Martin, I'm glad you picked the Dead Boys because they almost made mine number 10, but I put the Stooges, Funhouse in my number 10 slot. This knocked out MC5 and the Ramones for me and the Dead Boys for me. It's a punk album, but was anybody calling it punk back then? The production on it doesn't really help, but there's a lot of chugging guitar on this. If they could have only borrowed Tony Iommi's guitar rig, this would have been a much heavier record. But as it stands, there is some stuff on here that does have a real kind of, again, that sort of chugging kind of vibe to it, like Down on the Streets. What do I do with my glasses? Uh, Loose in 1970 are pretty heavy. TVI is over the top. Dirt is kind of weird, dark, and strange. And LA Blues is some crazy, over the top, chaotic noise type thing. So the production doesn't really help, but I think that there's some stuff there, and I wanted to put them on because it's just so early. Number 9 for me, Blue Oyster Cult, Secret Treaties. This is another one that's sabotaged a little bit by the dry, boxy kind of mix of those black and white records. But this one sneaks in because of the lyrics and the overall sort of vibe of some of these songs, like Career of Evil, Subhuman, Harvester of Eyes, Fleming Telepaths, Astronomy. I think those are all pretty heavy. And again, with the thought-provoking kind of weird lyrics to them, that sort of adds to the heaviness. If I had gone with On Your Feet and On Your Knees, all those songs, much like with Kiss Alive, they sound heavier in a live format. All right, speaking of Kiss, I went with Hotter Than Hell from 74. Here, the murky, cloudy production adds to the heaviness. For me, Parasite, Going Blind, Watching You, Strange Ways. To me, those are almost like proto metal songs. Especially Strange Ways is almost like a doom song with that riff, and
Yeah, it
again
is.
with the production on it, makes it really heavy. Okay, number 7. I went with Yesterday and Today, but I went with their first album, and they're from California. They're self-titled 1976. For me, this knocked out Montrose and Gamma. I could have almost put the first Gamma record was on my list really early on, but I went with Yesterday Today, and a lot of it had to do with the guitar sound. Man, oh man, does his guitar sound great on this, especially the lead sound. In an alternate world where Van Halen never existed, Yesterday and Today might have been able to be Van Hits, slotted into kind of what Van Halen was, because there's just some fantastic guitar playing on this, and there's some pretty heavy stuff on it too. Heavy rockers like Animal Woman, 25 Hours a Day, Game Playing Woman, Come On Over, Earthshaker, fast driving one with a weird kind of quick like bass drum thing going on there. And My Heart Plays Too is kind of a dark blues kind of vibe, maybe like something you might have heard Zeppelin do, like Since I've Been Loving You. All right, number 6, Alice Cooper, Killers from 1971. This one lands on my list for the scary, campy horror vibe that Alice has. Songs like Halo of Flies, Desperado, Dead Babies, and Killer. You Drive Me Nervous is also pretty aggressive in kind of a Detroit Stooges MC5 kind of way. Number 5, Legs Diamond. They make my list here. They're from California. A Diamond is a Hard Rock, 1977. The great guitar sound, title track, Waiting, Jailbait. Those are all heavy riffs. Woman is kind of a dark ballad. I Think I
Killer.
Got It is fast driving. It reminds me of like a UFO, Lights Out. And Evil has kind of a sinister vibe to it. Sir Lord Baltimore, they make my list also at number 4. They're from Brooklyn with their Kingdom Come album, 1970. Man, the guitar and the bass on this album is just so fuzzed out and over the top. It's just crazy. So stuff like Master Heartache, the bass sound is just crushing on it. Hard Rain Fallen, Ain't Got Hung on You, crazy over the top like lyrics and just energy and everything. Lady of Fire, the guitars are just like the amplifier is ready to explode. Lake Isle of Inner's Free. Yeah, it's kind of a weird Renaissance sounding song with that like harpsichord sound. And the song Kingdom Come, the massive guitar and bass sound. Okay, Riot. I went with Rock City. Somebody mentioned Warrior already. It's like early. Say they said power metal. I could say speed metal with that too. Desperation, Heart of Fire, and Angel. Those are fast, heavy driving rockers. And Rock City, Gypsy Queen, and This Is What I Get are have that sort of anthemic Riot, Swords and Tequila, like fist in the air kind of vibe. Number 2 for me, Van Halen, the self-titled from 1978. There is some pretty heavy stuff on here when I started thinking about it. I'm on Fire, I'm the One, Atomic Punk. Those are real high energy, really kind of over the top in some ways. You really got me, even though it's a cover. It definitely raised the heaviness level of that song. I mean, a lot of this comes down to Eddie Van Halen's guitar sound and guitar playing. Running with the Devil, that bass thing at the beginning, it's kind of a little ominous, a little bit spooky the way that song comes in. And I know Martin doesn't like, him and his buddies didn't like Little Dreamer, but I think it's got kind of a weird, strange kind of vibe to it. So, and number 1 for me, same as you, Butch, I got to go with that Bang record, man. 1972, Bang was from Philadelphia. And you're right, this is the closest thing that we get to Black Sabbath over here in the States. The vocals are very kind of Ozzy-like in that they're a little deadpanned and the way his
Hmm.
delivery is, but the heavy doomy riffs, the guitar sound too, it's very like sort of low mid-range type of guitar sound. Whereas Kingdom Come, that album, the guitars sound like really fuzzed out guitar amps turned up on 10. The Bang record has this like mid-rangey guitar sound that I just love. Lions Christians, The Queen, Future Shock, the heavy Sabbath like vibe in that. And the moody acoustic numbers too, like Last Will and Testament and Our Home. So all right, there you go. There's my 10 for the heaviest from the 70s. I'll read Darren from Sabbath Sunday. Darren also does my Black Sabbath podcast. We do Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. He had at number 10, Left End, Spoiled Rotten, 1974. Truth
That's a
and
good one.
Janie, No Rest for the Wicked, 76. Blue Oyster Cult, their first album, Blue Oyster Cult, 72. Captain Beyond from 72. Bang, self-titled, 72. Cactus, One Way or Another, 71. Axis, Axis, It's a Circus World, 78. Blood Rock, self-titled, 1970. Dust, self-titled, 71. And Sir Lord Baltimore, Kingdom Come, 1970. Darren went the route of the more obscure numbers. So,
Yeah.
all right, there you go. There's our picks for the 10 heaviest American albums. Like Butch mentioned, when you really start adding up the numbers, putting them on the scale, like Martin mentioned, it's a interesting exercise because it isn't quite as cut and dry. If we were having a discussion about European heavy 70s bands, I think this would have been easier to put the list together. So, all right, so let us know down below in the comments what you think of our lists. Let us know what your picks would be for the 10 heaviest albums from America in the 70s. Thanks to Martin for joining me here at the Lair and joining us here for Dudes Talking Metal. And on our next episode, I'm going to have the same three of us are going to be here, and we're going to be giving you the who we feel is the most important, most essential, most influential, maybe American hard rock heavy metal band that came out of America. So tune in for that episode 2. Until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.